Location, location, location. You know, when we're property hunting, we're looking for the best places to invest in. Now, Will, how do we determine what areas are the best places to invest in?
Well, the first thing that I'm looking at, or actually one of the first things I do before I even start this, is I defer to someone like you. I know it's a bit of a shameless plug, but Andre, being a realtor, that's his job. It's his expertise. He looks at all the different factors and he helps people determine what area makes the most sense to invest in. Now, that being said, let's get down and actually talk about what I'm actually looking for. So the first thing is going to be economic growth. In general, it's the economic development, the overall growth of a particular area. And there's a number of factors within that. So the first one that comes to mind is, of course, employment opportunities.
That's right. So employment opportunities, like you want to look for areas that have more than just one solid employer for the entire area. You want to have diversity, you have multiple employments that people can go and live in this area and actually have a job. So job stability, how much income they make, all that is really relevant in this influence.
Yeah.
And then we go to like the population growth.
Yeah, so of course, once you have a good employment environment, lots of people flock there, and you're going to see that in terms of the population growth numbers. So pretty straightforward. You're looking for the net migration, people coming and going from an area. You want something with positive net migration, which means the area is going to be growing.
So once you have that, the rental market conditions are really important to talk about as well, because if you have a low vacancy rate, that will actually have a positive impact for your investments. So when you have population growth, if you have employment opportunities, you will inevitably have a low vacancy rate.
So there's a number of things that tie into that, and later points as well to this. But the more demand you have, the less affordable it ends up being, because the rental prices get jacked up, as well as home prices. So the affordability is certainly something to look at, because that's also going to be one of the factors you consider in terms of where you can afford to invest. Sure, one area might be definitely the best place to invest, but can you afford to get into that particular market?
Yes.
So that does play into things.
So one of my favorite economic influences are transportation.
Yeah.
So when you have infrastructure development in an area, that is so important. For example, a highway expansion. When we talk about a new subway line going in, when we talk about a new GO train station coming in, these are all positive influences on an area, and it ripples out. But let's not go too far, because the saying goes, try to invest within 800 meters of that new highway exit or that new subway station, because that is where you'll gain the most appreciation and rental values.
So now that we've talked a little bit about some of the things we're looking for, why don't we give people our top 5 list? Because everyone loves lists, so let's get into it right now. If I were to invest today, what are my top 5 choices? Do you want to lead the list here?
Sure. Place number 5 is Hamilton. Why Hamilton? Well, it's right between the US border and Toronto. It's a more affordable option than Toronto, and it has major employment and university schools. So those are big factors. Also, the way to get there, transportation improvements, is expanding. That is another critical factor. So Will, how about number 4?
Number 4, London, Ontario. So in London, there's a lot of indicators that's a little bit different from Hamilton, because Hamilton tends to rely on the boom bust and echo from Toronto, whereas London is far enough away and has its own economic drivers. It's got the hospitals, it's got the jobs, it's got the schools and everything, but it's not directly correlated to Toronto and the performance of Toronto. So I do see some growth happening there, so that's definitely a place I'd be looking at.
Okay, so place number 3.
Yeah.
Barrie, Ontario. Now, Barrie, Ontario is one of my favorite areas because it's by the lake. And it used to be considered simply just cottage country, but now it's actually a destination for people to live. And there's actually employers there. There's jobs. They're expanding the highways. That GO train goes there. There is so much good in Barrie, and the population is slated to boom and explode over the next 10 years.
Yeah, so Barrie is one of the places I personally invest. Actually, almost all the places on this list I personally invest. So Barrie, I do have my very first rental property out there, and it's performed exceptionally well. And for all the reasons you just mentioned, I do recommend it. We're looking at strong growth. It has an overflow from Toronto in terms of population, people wanting bigger houses, bigger yards, and so on and so forth at a more affordable price. So that's what's really driving Barrie up, and that's still the case.
So yeah, absolutely. What's number 2?
Number 2 is Guelph, which personally I love. I haven't been able to get into the Guelph market though. It's been driving me nuts. So I know you've brought me to a couple of them. They've got really strong rental market. As such though, investors know about it, and it can be a bit challenging to find some deals. We've gone out and we've seen some, and we've lost some really good ones.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
So what are 2 things that you like about Guelph?
Well, for one, it's the rental market, and I know that's a very generic statement, but there's all the factors there. It's close enough to Toronto. It's got the major schools again. It's got the employment there, and it's very nice. Like, it's a beautiful city. So there's a lot of things going for it.
Okay. What's number 1, Will?
Well, it should come to no surprise to people, but Toronto, that's still number 1 on my list, and I've heard people shy away from it and come back to it, but really, everything that's happening in the world is pointing at Toronto. Like, we've got, we've talked about this before in the past, but immigration, and everyone that lands in Canada, they all know Toronto and they're gonna flock there. So there's gonna be huge demand. The rental market, it's been all over the news that there's not that many rental units available, which means higher rents. Like, the thing is, it's not great for renters, but it's great for us as landlords because you get your pick of the litter and higher rents.
So people might say, it's too expensive, and you're not going to be cash flowing. There's 100 reasons why people will give as to why they don't invest in Toronto. But I can tell you that I've invested in many of these cities that we've discussed right now, and I come back to Toronto personally. I personally believe in Toronto, why I live there, why I would live there today, 5 years, 10 years, and 25 years from now. It's the northern Manhattan, okay? It's the center of Canada, and some might say it's the center of the universe.
Yeah, we have that bad rep, that's for sure.
So there's a lot to be said about Toronto, and I can't say enough about it.
Now, one thing I did want to point out, because there's a lot of people that say, I can't find a property, I can't get the cash flow, so on. I have never bought a property in Toronto that has not been cash flow positive from day one. So if I can do it, you can certainly do it. It is possible. Now, the caveat to that is you might need to do a little bit of work to the property. We got a triplex, we put in a 4th unit just to bring the numbers up. Duplex, we make it nicer, we do a few things. But in every case, there's no excuse to not have the property be cash flow positive from day one.
I agreed. So that wraps it up. We talked about the economic influences. We talked about the top 5 areas that we personally like to invest in right now. And now this leads into our next week's episode, which will talk about how to maximize your rental income for every unit.
Yeah, one of my favorite topics. So hey, looking forward to it. Stay tuned, and stay tuned. Come and see us next week.